like to call the meeting of the Queens Municipality Regular Council meeting to order Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. A reminder that you should put your phones on mute and that the meeting is being audioed and video recorded, and no other such recording should be made. Changes or approval to the agenda. Are there any changes or approval to the agenda? If not, I ask for a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Romero. All in favor? Passed. Welcome to Peter and Linda. Is Linda coming with you as well, Peter?
Yes, she is.
For a presentation from Queens County Museum. If you'd like to find yourselves to our table.
I want to look at my Peter? How you doing?
And Peter, you and Linda are going to introduce each other?
Yes, we will.
You want-
Just gonna. It's not clicking.
The little button on the side.
No. I warned them that I'm not very good technically. I've got to go. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Peter Leslie. I'm the chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Queens County Museum. I'm new. And beside me is Linda Rayfuse, who I'm sure you all know. Linda is the director of the Queens County Museum. I've been chairman for about a month. Linda has been director for almost since I was born. And between the two of us, we're here to do a presentation on the Queens County Museum tonight. Now, I'm sure you'll be happy to know that we're not here to ask you for money. We're not here to ask for anything. This is just an information session. One thing we've noticed over time is a lot of people have ideas about the Queens County Museum, and to put it bluntly, they're wrong. So we're here just to inform you. If you already know what we're going to tell you, that's great. If we manage to teach you anything tonight, that's even better. Now, there we go. Who are we? Well, we're actually four organizations. We're the Queens County Historical Society, and I'm going to go through and talk to you, explain who each of these is. We're the Queens County Historical Society. We're the Queens County Museum Board of Trustees. It's me. Queens County Museum and the Queens County Museum of Justice. And there's two other entities we're going to talk about tonight, Perkins House, obviously, and the Milton Blacksmith Shop. Now, I'm going to tell you that they are actually not part of the Queens County Museum, but if we didn't talk about them tonight, then during the entire presentation, you'd be thinking, what about the Perkins House, and not paying attention to me. So rest assured, we're going to talk to you about the Perkins House. I'm old-fashioned enough, you know, that I reflexively, I want to look at the paper version of this, and I have the electronic version on the wall over here. So the Queens County Historical Society was founded in 1929. This was Tom Riddall and all his crowd. And in 1929, they formed the society, but it wasn't until 1934 that it was actually incorporated into a legal entity. Now, just so you know, for those of you who are legal buffs or interested in this type of thing, although the word society is in the name, it actually is not a society under the Societies Act. It has its own piece of legislation, and it is an entity unto itself. It's not governed by the Societies Act. It was incorporated in 1934 by the legislature of Nova Scotia, and I'm not going to read. I've given you the text of the objects of the society. I'm not going to read it to you. It's a very 1934 type of thing. But basically, what it says is, hey, we're the museum for the county, and our object is to collect, preserve, and make available to people and make people aware of the history of the county. Next, we have a Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees is a body of the Historical Society, and it's created by the Historical Society's bylaws to oversee the operations of the Queens County Museum. So the Historical Society is on top, the Board of Trustees is underneath the Historical Society, and the Board of Trustees, basically, their job is, the Board of Trustees and the museum are almost indistinguishable. As the lawyer in me cringes when I say that, because of course they're vastly distinguishable. And the members of the Board of Trustees are appointed by the Historical Society. And their job, like I say, is to oversee the museum. And then we have the main entity, the Queens County Museum itself. Now, the Queens County Museum, in addition to the Historical Society's objectives, which are actually broader than the museum's objectives and older, the Queens County Museum is there to promote an understanding of Queens County history and an awareness of Queens County's, well, frankly, future possibilities. We develop, preserve, and exhibit a significant collection, which is growing every day. And we'll talk about that a little later. The size of the collection is causing us problems. We take a significant role in leadership and scholarship in the context of the history of Queens County. We engage and provide access to audiences locally, nationally, and internationally. We deliver innovative programming. A lot of this is obviously a little, what can I say, restrained right now because of COVID. But the museum endeavors to deliver programming throughout the year in normal times. And that's something that we're probably going to work on expanding in the future. We want to be a world-class museum, and we apply museum standards, which is very important. When you see an exhibit at the Queens County Museum, you can be assured that we know the provenance of that exhibit, or we can tell you there is no provenance. And therefore, it might be what somebody says it is, or it may have been purchased at Walmart the day before. I mean, we've all watched Antiques Roadshow, I'm sure, so you know the significance of not having a provenance of something. And we're part of the Community Museum Assistance Program. We're one of 63 museums across the province. And the Community Museum Assistance Program, we call it CMAP, is the funding program that the province administers to fund community museums in the province. We'll talk about this a little later. There's a big difference between a CMAP museum, a museum that's funded through the CMAP program, because they're partially funded, as opposed to provincial museums, such as the Maritime Museum in Halifax, which is 100% funded and directly, in a way, directly managed by the province. So, what does the museum do? Well, we catalog and maintain a collection of historical artifacts. And that's that word catalog means a lot. We don't just have a building up there full of stuff. We cross your fingers, pray, we know what we have and where it is, right? We get evaluated on this every 4 years, and one of the evaluation tests is they pick something out of the blue out of our records, and we have to go find it for them. And so far it's always worked, but you know, cross your fingers, like I say. The artifacts are professionally curated and cataloged, and where possible, we professionally preserve them. That's a bigger problem, because the preservation of artifacts is, frankly, expensive. And sometimes, on a long-term basis, it requires a physical facility to preserve, and you know, we have what we have. We interpret the history of Queens County. This is a big one. We maintain a genealogy archive and provide research support. I always tease Linda here that she just has it all memorized anyways. So if you have a question, just ask her and she'll know it off the top of your head. But genealogy over the years has become increasingly more popular and increasingly popular. You certainly see it with the DNA tests that you can get now. There's TV shows on the television where they do, you know, famous people's genealogy. And people are interested in this stuff. It brings people to Liverpool from all over the world to do genealogical research. And so the genealogy archive is important. We work with the community to, as people do their genealogy, we work with them to deposit their research with us so that it can be shared with everybody else. And obviously we have to work with other genealogical centers around. The biggest ones for us being Shelburne and Lunenburg, because they're right next door. And we also maintain an archive of information of general interest. When I first learned about this, I thought, oh, we're just a dumping spot. But everything from old school records to copies of the local newspapers to photographs and pictures are at the museum. We strive, again, to catalog and record everything that we have to make it easier to find things. Obviously, if you're looking for a particular newspaper article, do we have everything back to, when did newspapers start in Liverpool?
1862.
See, she's got this stuff memorized, it's great. And so 1862, and we basically have all of them up to when the Advent stopped publishing. We can't find your story for you, but we can find a particular edition for you. And so that's what part of what we do. It's all there, and it's all, like I say, it's as organized as it can be. If you're looking for a photograph of a particular person, you're going to have to sit there and go through a bunch of photographs. But at least we've got them in boxes. We undertake activities for the public. We try our best to make the museum part of the social fabric of the community. We didn't this year because of COVID, but we normally have an Easter celebration. We have the Christmas Festival of Trees in Dickinsville. What did I leave out there?
Halloween.
Halloween. I knew there was one.
Big move.
And, you know, you're probably wondering, what does an Easter egg hunt have to do with the history of Liverpool? Well, not a heck of a lot. But you do these things to get people used to coming to the museum. If somebody can come for an Easter egg hunt with their children and make the museum less of an imposing spot, if they can have a look around while they're there and want to come back, we feel that we've done our job. So as much as possible, we interact with the community. We provide support to anyone interested in the background and history of the community, including the maintenance. We have a library. It's, of course we have a library, but we have a library of historically relevant books where we can provide you books that, I don't know, some of you may know I'm a knitter, and when I wanted historic patterns for mittens, where do I go? But I go to the museum, and they were able to provide it for me, and I've never returned that book, by the way. I know that too. But I know I have it, and it's much the same as we have cookbooks. We have a significant collection of old home remedies. I don't know if from the Simeon Perkins diary, if you know what the remedy for rickets is, but we throw you down the well and let you sit in the cold water for a day. Just the Queens County Museum building, this is just a bit of interest. The building we're in, and this is the museum building, it was built in 1980 by the province of Nova Scotia and the Historical Society. It was cost shared. And The Historical Society signed over its interest to the province, in return for which the province now owns the building and maintains the building. Queens County Museum pays the operating expenses. We pay the electrical bill, the province fixes the gutters, you know, the type of arrangement. Now, and lastly, we have the Queens Museum of Justice. This is the old courthouse that you're all familiar with. It operates under the auspices of the Queens County Museum. It is not technically part of the museum, and that's very important for us, for funding reasons. We have certain funding that is intended only for the Queens County Museum, and we cannot spend it on things like the Museum of Justice. The courthouse is leased from the region. If most of you are new, 2 of you aren't, you remember signing the lease last year for last spring. We're in the first year of a 5-year lease, and the museum is unfunded by anyone. It operates purely on donations from the public. Now, we're going to talk about things that aren't part of the museum, but are of interest. Milton Blacksmith Shop. The Blacksmith Shop began as an entity of the Milton Heritage Society, which formed in the early 1980s. And it was the Heritage Society was formed to preserve the blacksmith shop. It was a community-run blacksmith shop. Jackie probably knows this better than I do, but it was a community-run blacksmith shop that was built in 1903. The building was owned and maintained by the Milton Village Commission. And of course, the regional municipality inherited it from the Milton Village Commission. There's a memorandum of understanding around somewhere. Anyway, the Queens County Museum looks after the administrative needs of the Milton Blacksmith Shop. So I don't know if you've all been to the blacksmith shop, but it's pretty small. There's no room for an office. And frankly, there's no administrative staff. So we do everything from paying their bills to if there's a summer student hired, which there is every year, I believe you take care of that, don't you? There is one employee currently who runs the Milton Heritage Society, who runs the museum. He's an employee of the Milton Heritage Society. And the Queens County Museum charges an administrative fee, an annual administrative fee for the work it does. However, the administrative fee is minute, and if there is one at all, because it depends on whether there's any money left over. We don't make money off this. And then Perkins House. It's almost done, I'm sure. You'll be glad to know. What's the anticipated finish date?
They'll be in there about 3 more weeks.
So, pretty close to being done. I believe the exterior is finished. And the interior is, I haven't really been inside of it yet, but I'm hearing great things about it.
It's being plastered and painted.
Yeah. And apparently the colors that are being used have been the subject of great debates and practically fistfights. And they, because they've got to use time-appropriate colors and shades of colors. And of course, companies can even, it's not just the color, but it's you've got to make it look like it's something that was used in the 1700s. The Perkins House was originally purchased by the Historical Society in 1934 from the family, the descendants of Simeon Perkins. And I don't know if you noticed it, the Historical Society was incorporated in 1934. It purchased it because it had to be a legal entity to purchase the house. It was turned over to the province in the early 1940s. When it was originally purchased, it was opened as a museum. And I believe the Queens County Museum's collection, or the Historical Society's collection at that time, was exhibited in the Perkins House. It was turned over to the province in the early 40s. The province opened it as a museum in 57. It's one of the Nova Scotia Museum's 28 sites that are fully funded. Perkins House is fully funded by the province. The funding for Perkins House and Queens County Museum are completely separate. It's locally managed by the Queens County Museum. The Queens County Historical Society manages it for the Nova Scotia Museum. That flows down through so that Linda here manages the Perkins House. Transportation, well, TIR maintains the building, there we get an annual grant for Perkins House, which is intended to fully fund its annual operations, everything from salaries and wages, utilities, advertising, and the Queens County Museum merely administers the funds that are given. Queens County Museum funding. This is always important. Our annual expenses run about $110,000 a year. This is for the Queens County Museum only. 30% of that comes from that CMAP, the Community Municipal Community Museums Assistance Program. 4% comes from the region, roughly. We get a $5,000 grant every year. That's been unchanged since actually the creation of the region. We make about 9% of our annual funding from the gift shop, about 4% from donations, and about 45% comes from fees charged for Perkins House administration, and 5% comes from other services. We charge research fees for involved genealogical research. We photocopy for people. We sell the copies of photographs, things like that. It's very important to note that some of this funding, for instance, the CMAP funding, is only for the Queens County Museum. We cannot spend it on the Museum of Justice or the Milton Blacksmith Shop. The Milton Blacksmith Shop also gets funding, a tiny bit of funding from the CMAP program. Now, I just want to point out that, just going to go back there for a second, just so you know that 45, you see that line, 45% from fees charged for Perkins House administration. That's not an administrative fee. We don't say to the province, for $47,000 a year, we'll run your museum. That's a lot of shared costs, things like that. It's you won't see a line on our financial statements that indicates a revenue from the province in return for managing Perkins House. Now, COVID funding. This is important because donations, gift shop sales, and services are all important, and services for the public are all important revenue streams. As you look at that slide from before, all of these have been reduced or become almost non-existent during COVID. In last year, the federal government gave funding that local museums could qualify for, and we were lucky enough to qualify for some of that funding. In 2021, there's no mention yet of federal funding, and if you hear of anything, let me know. But right now, we haven't heard anything. The province has given no COVID funding to local museums. They're still funding their provincial museums, of course, but those 63 museums who are funded by CMAP, they're only funded partially. They've lost all the sources of income, because donations, things like that are a big source of income for these museums. And the province gave no funding last year, and there's been no mention this year. And so we'll just have to wait and see. Future plans. We are looking at an expansion of the museum site. You may think, why? If you walk into the museum, one of our biggest problems is that our collection has become so massive we literally, space that should be dedicated to displays and exhibits is in fact being used for storage. And that's a problem. There's an upstairs to the building that's full. And then downstairs, things are pretty crammed in there. It shouldn't be as tight as it is, but we're just in a space crisis. And it becomes a question of what do we do? Do we get rid of some of our collection, which we don't want to do, obviously. We can't just put things in a storage facility, because a lot of these things require special conditions, and so it's a difficult problem. A new site would contain new exhibit galleries and additional space for storage. We also want to focus on the Mi'kmaq and the Black communities. Right now, there are some displays, and we have information available, but just because the museum is, we're so limited in our facility right now, we can't really meet these obligations properly. So we're looking at a special focus. We're also looking at being able to focus more on the Port of Privateers and Liverpool's privateering heritage. To carry out plans like this, of course, we do have that inconvenience that the province owns our building and our land. Notice I say it's our building, our land, but they just own it. And so obviously we can't expand our building without their okay. And so we're working with that. And this expansion would be funded by federal and provincial sources and donations. And that's everything. Just like I say, just a bit of an informational lesson, I guess, and I didn't ask you for any money at all, so you don't have any hard decisions to make. But if you do have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
We will take questions if anyone has any questions, and thank you for bridging between all those bodies that you are involved with. It's always helpful for council to know that. Any questions? Councilor Brown.
Yeah, I had two questions.
Sure.
We talked to, we had some people in from TIR, and they said at one point that the Perkins House Museum is the oldest private dwelling in North America. Okay. I'm just curious, because I'd never heard that before.
No.
I thought it would be quite
Perkins
something.
Perkins House is the oldest house in the Nova Scotia Museum system.
Okay. The other question I had was.
It was built in 1766.
1766. So we have older houses in Liverpool itself. huh?
Dexter's Tavern is older than
Yes.
Perkins House by a few years,
Yeah.
down the street.
Yeah. The other question I had was what timeframe are you looking at for the expansion?
We don't know yet. We're so at the beginning.
Okay.
We don't know. It's a really difficult time these days to go to government and say, oh, could we have an extremely large amount of money? It's also difficult, I'll be honest, they just spent a whole bunch of money on Perkins House. And, certainly the federal government may not care, but the provincial government is going to look at that and say, well, should we be spreading it out a bit more? We certainly got our job cut out for us. So I don't expect, it's not going to happen in the next year or two, I'm sure. But I shouldn't say that, who knows?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Fancy.
Yeah, one thing you guys have mentioned here about is that people are phoning in for genealogies. And so do you have people that may think like, well, I wonder how my parents or great-great-great-grandparents came over and try to find back to the history of them landing in Nova Scotia in the first place?
Yeah. We get genealogical inquiries from all over the world, especially North America. Descendants, it would really boggle your mind if you knew where the descendants of early Queens County people are in this world. And they do, continue to inquire about their family history. And we offer that research when some of them can't come. We offer that research, for them.
Okay, thank you.
And Linda, I know that Queens County Museum represents all the history of Queens.
Yeah.
And so genealogy people are from all of our forefathers
Yeah.
in all regions.
Yeah.
And it's always busy there.
And it's not to be, forgotten too, that North Queens Heritage House has a really nice little archives as well. Because there's a lot of descendants from North Queens that have been spread out around North America. And so they have a nice archives as well.
Well, if there are no further questions, I thank you,
Thank you.
and may you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Four point zero, tabling of petitions. Are there any petitions to table? 5.0, public question comment session. I remind those making any comments or questions to please state your name and your civic address before we begin. Who's up first? Any public, anyone wishes to make a comment?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I have a question for you,
David, I know who you are, but you have to do it for the record. Name and civic address.
I thought it said, David Huskins, 160 Church Street.
Thank you.
Now, one concern, each fall they put out about these parking in the winter, that they have to have the car off the street. And I'm wondering who has the lead to get them moved. Is it the police, or the ones that plowing, or whatever, if they're in the street when you're plowing?
I'll direct that question to our CEO because I do not know the answer to that.
That would be the RCMP.
It's the RCMP.
And so anybody can make a complaint. So a resident can make a complaint. Our staff, a plow operator could make the complaint. Our bylaw enforcement officer or our engineer who's on duty on a particular day can make the complaint. But it would have to be the RCMP who have the ability to enforce the Motor Vehicle Act, which is what it's covered under.
So has it been any in the last few years?
I can't answer that. You'd have to ask the RCMP that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak?
I said, go, they went now. I'm not rushing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Leah Clattenberg, and I live in Hunts Point, Rose Lane, 10 Rose Lane. I'm a grade 7 at South Queens Middle School, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my peers and our Liverpool community. We thank you for taking the invite to write to the Minister of Environment for asking for further water quality testing to be done on the Mersey River. We understand from the Minister's response that it would be the municipality that would have to take the lead on the testing the Mersey River and finding the source of the high intercroctide levels. Monday, March 1st, our students will be having a Zoom meeting with Bernadette Jordan. We would like to know if the mayor and council have thought about what steps will be taken to further test the Mersey River for intercroctide. We also are wondering for the municipality that will attempt to seek out the source if they find due to their contamination.
Thank you for your questions. And the minister's letter which you received, because we sent it to your teacher, quotes, projects are often led by local organizations, to which we may provide guidance upon request. Municipalities are local governments. What the Department of Environment does is it provides guidance to local organizations such as Blue Nose Coastal Action Center. Or if you, as a school group, wish to further the project along, Department of Environment would assist you in explaining where the water test should be done, the proximity to outfalls, etc. And they did provide David Clark's phone number, who's the local representative. But local organizations does not specifically say, Department of Environment says it's the local municipality's job to do water testing in rivers. Because it is not our job to water test rivers or lakes for levels of bacteria. What we will do is we will look after our own system. The outfall at the end of Waterloo Street is our responsibility. The former town built it. This region has to correct that, and we've reapplied for funding levels from provincial and federal government, but that is our responsibility, not water testing the Mersey River or the Medway River or Pond Hook Lake or Port Medway. That's not the responsibility of our tax dollars and our tax people to water test for malfunctioning sewers. And as you can also tell from the letter, the minister said how difficult it is for the Environment Department to just randomly go on people's properties. They need to have complaints from people in order to gain access to those homeowners. And it is the homeowner's responsibility to have working septic systems. That's what the letter says.
Hello, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Jill Luschner. I live at 452 East Berlin Road, East Berlin, BOJ1HO. I'm just wondering, do you know how much it costs to have testing done, that type of testing done?
We do not.
Like, is this something that we would be able, do you think our students would be able to fundraise for or apply for a grant to have done?
I would suggest that if your students are interested, that they do seek that out. There's lots of available grant programs. You could speak to Blue Nose Coastal Action Center, which is located in Lunenburg. You could speak to David Clark about what type of funding programs there are available. But again, if there's malfunctioning septic systems, it's going to rest upon the homeowner, not the municipality of Queens, to correct that situation.
Right. Okay, so based on what you were just saying here, I was just reading through the letter. So the minister states in his letter that in order for enforcement action to take place on a malfunctioning system, it must be confirmed by an NSE inspector. However, an inspector will not go on site to confirm a malfunctioning system unless the public has provided reasonable grounds for them to do so. So I'm curious to know, if finding extremely high internal cocci levels at locations along the river through rounds of public testing like we did, is not enough reasonable grounds to confirm a malfunction problem, then what exactly would be other than digging up your neighbor's front lawn? How would you possibly know otherwise, other than testing the water and finding a high internal cocci levels, that there would be malfunctioning systems along the river?
That's a question you're going to have to direct to the Minister of Environment. Those are his words, and there's a new Minister of Environment announced today. So those are his words, and what the provincial government states their responses on, you will have to ask either the minister or David Clark. Because provincial government is very separate from municipal government. And so that reasoning is their reasoning.
So I just understand then that you don't wanna have any responsibility in ensuring that people's septics are properly working along
It's
the
not
river.
our jurisdiction. It clearly states it's not our jurisdiction. We cannot go on people's properties as a municipal government and investigate their septic systems. It's a NSC inspector, Nova Scotia Environment Inspector. And we simply can't go on people's properties. Correct?
Okay, so then if nothing's done about this then, and then our kids keep swimming in the river, like Leah here who swims with her friends under the Henry Hennessy Bridge, the place where on January 11th we just tested, and we found numbers of 758 enterococci levels per 100 milliliter. That's like 4 times the amount for what you should be allowed to swim in, but I won't touch your skin. I just feel like the municipality should be a little bit more supportive in this, rather than just saying this is not anything to do with us. This is not our responsibility. I feel like there should be a little bit more from you guys in this matter. But yes, I will certainly be in touch. I've already been in touch with Coastal Action, and I certainly will be getting in touch with them and asking them how much this costs and whether this is something that we can do on our own. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Leah, for coming in and attending our meeting and standing up and speaking on behalf of you. I know your dad's quite proud of you. Any other public comment questions?
Purple's up.
Good evening, Your Lordship, fellow councilors. Chief Conrad, Greenfield District, 4960 Midway River Road. I'm here tonight with my fellow chiefs. We were told that the EMO Comfort Center agreement was going to be tabled on tonight. We just came here to sit, to listen. No one was going to talk, and I said, well, maybe one of us could talk. So I'm talking about it. You know, it's been a year or two now, and we've been back and forth, this said, he said this, I said this, you said that. And basically, we just had enough of everything onto it. We had a meeting, and you guys were all here tonight with our emergency services, and we just said, okay, enough is enough. We're just gonna, whatever you guys want to do, we'll all agree with it. But we just want to make sure that everybody knows that this has been a heartache for all of us, and, you know, things were said. We want to make sure that people realize that. I know everybody does, but whatever happens tonight, and we're going to back it as best we can. And just let the public know that we're always out there. We're always going to be there for them. We're never going to shut down. We're always going to be there for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Conrad, and I think there's been grievance on both ends. And we look forward to your presentation coming up March in the evening, March 9th. And Heather, did you go to see if Chief Wynot is still there?
I did, and I didn't see him. I went outside and he wasn't there.
Okay, thanks. 6.0, approval of the minutes of Tuesday, February the 8th. Moved by Councillor Hawk, seconded by Councillor Gibney. The minutes be approved. All those in favor? Passed. (9.1). I will need a motion to table this item. Moved by Councillor Charlton, seconded by Councillor Hawks, that the motion be untabled. All those in favor? So the motion's untabled. So at the fire services meeting that was held recently,
I bought that one.
take that one off. All that one's free. You didn't get hurt your back or anything, no?
No, all right.
So, the chair snapped.
That's junk. Putting out $100,000 in this, for sure, yeah.
So at the last fire services meeting, this was added on request of the fire chiefs. And basically, there are two changes they would like made. And the first, and I'll read them out, and you can think about them. The first is that this agreement shall be reviewed on an annual basis by council. And the second has to do with the lump sum of the comfort station. And the sentence is to be added. In cases where the reasonable cost of providing this service exceeds this daily rate, a facility owner may submit original receipts for consideration of reimbursement by the municipality. Are there any other changes that any member of council would like to see made? If not, then is there consensus that those changes will be made to the memorandum?
Yes.
Consensus on that? If so, then we need to go back to our original motion, which read, the Council of Region of Queens Municipality. Can we remake that again?
The motion's on the floor now.
It's on the floor now. So the motion is, as you will recall, the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality approved the draft memorandum of understanding, knowing that those two items are to be added. Respecting the use of community facilities as a municipal comfort center or municipal emergency shelter during an emergency. And further, that council authorize the mayor and chief administrative officer to enter into any agreements related to this memorandum of understanding with appropriate local community organizations that are interested. That is the motion as it so stands. Councillor Charlton?
I'll make that motion if I could.
Well, the motion is on the floor.
Oh, we don't
So
have to redo it.
Are there any other discussion points? Councillor Brown?
I think we need a motion to amend this motion where we have the two items.
I spoke to CAO about that, and we have a motion, and we're simply going to, under consensus, add those two other items.
Yeah, I thought since the motion's on the floor, we would have to make a motion to amend.
If, under normal circumstances, you would, but in this particular situation, the amendment would make the original motion out of order because it would be a completely different motion.
Okay.
So that's why it's the unique nature of this one, so.
So this gets the job done,
Thank you for the explanation.
and it's to the satisfaction of the chiefs as discussed at the last fire services. You ready for the question?
Question?
All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carried. A bylaw prohibiting certain noises. Councillor Brown, you wish this to be added. Would you like to speak on this?
Yes, I would. I've received calls from a number of residents in Queens County, not in just one area, and they've asked that Queens Bylaw number 7 be updated. This is a 24-year-old bylaw, and the only thing that it covers right now is we have quiet hours from midnight until 6 a.m. Our bylaw only covers noises created by stereos, music instruments, things like that. It doesn't cover any other noise. So it doesn't talk to the quality of life of people around somebody who makes a noise. And it's way out of line with what other jurisdictions around the province have. Most of them have, given at least 8 hours of quiet time for residents, which is, what the Department of Health says you need is sleeping time, 8 hours a day for the majority of people. And the majority of districts in Halifax, Kings, Shelburne, Digby, Lunenburg, Yarmouth, all have limits on the decibel levels that reach adjoining properties, so that it doesn't affect, it's quantitative. Right now, when people call with a complaint about the noise, they're told that it's unenforceable because we don't have a bylaw that has any quantitative levels in it, or any other noise besides stereos or loudspeakers. So I'd like to see staff research this and bring back a recommendation to update the bylaw.
Any other opinions or comments? Yeah, Councillor Charlton?
we've all been receiving these complaints about noise, and given the fact that that it is quite dated, I think it does need to be revisited, so I would be in agreement with Councilor Brown.
Councilor Fancy?
Would abusive language, inappropriate language and things like that fall under this, or not? I'm just saying, when you're doing it, do we need to make it more inclusive?
I do believe that that is a criminal offense,
Right.
to be using abusive language in public. And, some of the problems that are relating from this, are things that would never be dealt with under a bylaw. Many things, I mean, it's a clear case of disturbing the peace in one situation, which is a totally criminal offense. Our bylaws, 24 years old, I've asked your CEO, there's been very few complaints to this, except for the ones stemming out of that one situation. There's been very few, if any, bylaw complaints about noise since the beginning of the Region of Queens, which is 24 years. And, you know, do we try to fix something in one situation which is definitely disturbing the peace by changing a bylaw? I mean, that's a question I don't ask. We all know that we're in a busy time right now, and we can give direction to staff if we wish to have them examine other bylaws, ask if they actually work, ask if they're enforceable, before we start beginning to change bylaws. Bylaws require a lawyer to change, and they require approval of the province. So it's not as easy a motion that we make, because we don't change these without legal counsel. So we, you know, so what type of direction do you really want to give staff? Do you want to give them direction to work with RCMP and look at the disturbance of the peace, which often matters are? Do you want to give them a certain time frame to look at other bylaws, understanding the time we're in right now, time frame we're working in? I mean, what is it that you really want done as a region on a whole? I mean, do you all want a bylaw that allows 8 hours of quiet? I mean, think about what that really means. 8 hours of silence. Do you really want that? Councillor Gidney.
When I was going through the other municipalities to see what they have in play, sometimes there's time changes through the week. In the weekend, there's different times. In the County of Kings, there's no fighting, screaming, shouting, or singing. And that would be under somebody yelling. Yeah, so that makes sense. So if there hasn't been a problem in the rest of the area, then I don't think if we change the bylaw, they're still gonna work with it. It's just that one area, and if we have an area that there's a problem, we have to fix it. And if we fix it by the bylaw, then that's what we gotta do. Because if there's a problem, we don't want it escalating. So we gotta take care of it at this point in time.
Councillor Hawks, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Ralph on that we need to change that. Can we change it to, like, instead of quiet time, like the dB level after, say, 10 o'clock or whatever, right?
So we'll have to investigate those sound measuring devices, to see if they actually work, how close you have to be to get a reading, all those types of things. And then we would have to purchase one.
Yeah.
So, if I may, Madam Chairperson, we have to be careful at looking at other people's bylaws. Just because other people have bylaws doesn't mean they're correct or they're enforceable. I have reached out to a few municipalities and no one I can find has ever issued a ticket under the noise bylaw. So while they have bylaws in place, they aren't enforcing them. The particular one in Kings County, I believe, only applies to New Minas, which is the urban area. So it doesn't apply to any of the other 40,000 people in Kings County. It typically only applies to those in New Minas in the urban area. So we have to be careful that we don't misinterpret what's in the bylaws. And I often hear about decibel levels, and as the mayor said, you can't just go to a big box store downtown Liverpool and buy a decibel meter. You've got to buy a commercial one that is tested and meets a standard. So if you go to court, someone has to testify that it met a particular standard and that it's been serviced and maintained and the readings are correct and accurate on a regular basis. And it's not something you can buy just one, because if you have multiple RCMP cars or you have a bylaw enforcement vehicle, they're all going to need to have one in their vehicle to be available whenever they're on the call out. So we have to be careful with that. And the decibel limits are also problematic in the sense that decibel levels are very odd. So for instance, I just pulled off today, an alarm clock is 80. I think one of the bylaws says you can't be over 45. 45, a car driving by is 50. A conversation in your house is 60. So to just pick a number of the air doesn't provide a lot of context for what we think we want to do. And I think in some of the situations it's very loud music, which gets the number much higher. And so there are some options to look at some of those things as well. But I just want to caution you not to read other people's bylaws and assume they're being enforced, because my research has shown they're not being enforced. And decibel levels are very complex to be able to enforce, as far as who's eligible to do it, who's properly trained, are the systems maintained, do they meet a court standard? Because when we go to court, we have to enforce our bylaw and our rules. We're not enforcing somebody else's rules. And so we have to just be careful that when we do make some changes, that we're comfortable and our solicitor is comfortable that what we're doing is enforceable law for our particular community.
So is it the time? Is it the time people would like to see change? Do you want it not at midnight to 6? What are some suggestions? Because staff will need some directions. They'll have to look, and keep in mind that when you make these things, they'll mean for dances and all types of things that you might like to go to. Or no, I shouldn't put it that way, not to a personal viewpoint. But let's say if it's 10 o'clock, then that means quiet at 10 o'clock at night all over Queens County. So is it the time, and if it's the time, what times would you suggest? Councillor Charlton?
Wouldn't there be provisions in that would exclude like the fire hall if they were having a dance? Because I'm pretty sure that could be a possibility.
How many exclusions can you put in there?
Yeah, but there were other ones that I've read that said that excluded like special events and different things. Like I would think that you would be able to put those provisions on there. You're not shutting the whole community down. That's not my wish.
What time? What's the
Well, right
time?
now I think that 12 a.m. to 6 is not really that reasonable. And saying that there should be exceptions for certain causes, but like 11 to 7 will give 8 hours of rest, like quiet time. I think that's a standard with most campgrounds use, is like 11 o'clock. Like you can still be outside having a fire, but you can't have a raging party. So
11 to 7? I don't know. I'm a night owl.
I think 11 to 7 is a reasonable time. I know most of the ones that I've read are based on Halifax rules, and they have a schedule, a class. Different noises have different, they have an appendix of schedules, and certain noises are allowed at certain times and not at others. And when we talk about the decibel level, it's the decibel level on a neighboring property, not at the place where it's happening. So, you know, if you have a large property, you can still have a noise. You can have a conversation in your property, but if you're having, you know, if your noise is keeping your neighbors awake, you know, a lot, or some of the places are making noise all day long. If you own a business, right now, the way our rules are said, if somebody next to you was playing a loud stereo all day, and you couldn't talk to your customers, there's nothing they could do because it wouldn't fall under our bylaws. It might be the nuisance with the RCMP, but they're basing a lot of their enforcement on our bylaws, or lack of enforcement on our lack of a bylaw. And I think we need times.
If I could, understood, and speaking with
And
the
if this doesn't get taken, this could spread. I mean, we're having one issue now, but if this issue doesn't get taken care of, this could spread to other areas, and you could have a greater problem around the county with no enforcement. And I think having rules in place stops a reasonable person from doing it, makes enforcement available for an unreasonable person.
The RCMP have always said that because complaints have always been made under the bylaw.
Yeah.
If a person were to go to the station or call the station and said they wish to make a disturbing the peace complaint, that becomes a criminal offense.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with our bylaw. And often, that disturbing the peace holds a lot more weight to those who are actually doing that than a noise bylaw. And and it may well be that regardless of what's done, people are going to have to make the disturbing the peace complaint to the RCMP, file the paperwork, and be ready to go to court and talk about how their neighbors are disturbing their peace. That is a criminal offense. Having said that, we need to get back to our bylaw. So 11 to 7. 11 to 7, it's a time most people would like to see change. Keeping in mind in the summer, some people like to get up and mow the grass early in the morning. With the council, you'll have to take that, right? It's daylight at 5:30 in the morning. We live in the country. You're restricting everyone not to be making any sounds that will disturb their neighbor until 7 o'clock. Carl's shaking his head no.
No, I'm like that.
Pardon?
I get up early in the morning and wood, cut the firewood, whatever, right? That's, you know,
7
I'm saying
o'clock,
no,
it's
then-
11 to 7, but these are things that we can have investigated, keeping in mind, we are a regional county.
yeah.
We can't restrict the noise people make on their boats, right? That's not a noise bylaw that we can restrict.
Bylaws help the people that can't get along with their neighbors, that will not associate, will not. If I go mow my lawn at 6 o'clock in the morning, my neighbors are not gonna care. Because I'm not gonna do it in the first place, but if I did, they've got something to work with. Right, if I'm gonna be that inconsiderate, then something's in place that they can say, look, the bylaw says this. And it's awful that we have to do that, but sometimes your neighbors don't care. So if Carl wants to go and chop his wood or do whatever at 5:30 in the morning, his neighbors don't mind, that's not a problem. The problem is if he's disturbing the neighbors and he wants to stop. I think that's one of the reasons for the bylaws. We have to have something in place so people that we can enforce.
So direction to staff, this is February, we're in the midst of budget, we've just got some new people in, and I suspect this problem will come up again the May long weekend. In order to get a bylaw rewritten, you're looking at months to get it through, and we'll be looking at budgeting for someone to do it. Any other opinions on it? Counselor Muse?
I've had complaints about noises as I've been counselor, and I know Jack had his complaints up Milton about noises, and people with four-wheelers with really loud exhaust or no exhaust. And so I don't think it's just the area that we're discussing with Councilor Brown's sister. And I think that we should work with the RCMP to find out, maybe they have some ideas on what we can do for a noise bylaw, but, if it's gonna take months, we gotta start it sometime, so I don't see what the difference is now.
So that's direction for staff, to investigate rewriting, to having someone rewrite this bylaw. To include 11 to 7 as a suggested time. Decibel readers, just look at various options and then bring them back in what time period?
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Look, take it.
Chances are it won't be ready by May.
I agree, and I think,
You understand that?
I think the majority of people that are complaining and having a problem realize that it takes time and they just want to see the process started. They, you know, they want to see, they want to know that the process is starting, and I think, you know, their neighbors who are causing a problem, once this process gets started, may see that it's not in their best interest to continue the activities that they're doing. So, you know, I think doing all of this will benefit everybody in the long run.
And maybe when we do get complaints from neighbors and their adjoining neighbors and foul language and loud music and dogs barking all day long, then a suggestion for them to contact the RCMP
Yes.
and actually go up and make a complaint for disturbing the peace
And
has a lot more weight
Yeah,
than our noise bylaw is going to have.
in a
yeah,
number
I
of
think
cases,
that's
this
the
has been
problem,
done.
right? That they should be going, they come to us, but they should be going to RCMP too.
Because that's a criminal
If they,
offense.
if they want, if they're really serious about it.
And in some of these cases, they have gone to the RCMP and they haven't gotten satisfaction because the RCMP have told them that there's no rules to enforce in Queens County.
Disturbing the peace
But
is,
I think there's a misunderstanding
Right.
as
I think
to,
so, yes.
as to what, and, because the question was asked of the staff sergeant when he was here. He didn't say it was a problem with their bylaw. And in my discussions with them and my discussions with some other people in the court system, they do not want to prosecute someone and give them a criminal record, which it would be a criminal record for disturbing the peace, for playing loud music. That's their hesitation. They'd much rather us enforce a rule under a municipal bylaw, which doesn't give somebody a criminal record. But as the mayor said, if somebody is being really obnoxious, really annoying, and so on and so forth, then they're more willing and open if someone wants to come forward and sign make a statement, go to court and testify, and those types of things. Then it's probably worthy of the court considering whether it should be a criminal record for those people because they are being not nice people versus people simply out and cutting wood at 6 in the morning. They don't want to give him a criminal record for that.
No.
But they also don't want to give him
They should.
$500. They also don't want to give a $500 fine for that. So that's the balance we're trying to find, and that was what the staff sergeant hinted at. So I don't think anybody has said if they have it's improper that the bylaw wasn't enforceable. It's more the provincial. They don't want to give somebody a criminal record for what they would see as a minor offense.
I stand
So
corrected.
because it would limit people from getting jobs and employment and all that stuff
Yeah.
if they have a criminal record in some instances.
Councilor Vacy?
I think what we're really just trying to do is try to establish some parameters that we'd like to be able to work under. And for most people, they're gonna work, if I'm cutting wood 6 o'clock in the morning, fellow says, look, I'm trying to sleep, I just come off night shift, could you please stop that? You know, that you could be able to work with reasonable people. We're talking about working with reasonable people. When they're unreasonable, then it has to go to a different level.
The complaint I hear most about is people's dogs barking all day.
And a lot
Okay,
of those
so,
bylaws-
Chris, do you understand your direction?
I do.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for bringing that forward, and I sure hope that we can fix that situation, one way or the other. Council had wished to have this room reconfigured for audio, video equipment. The documentation is in your package, and there is a recommendation to be made. If someone so wishes to make that. Councilor Hughes?
I'll move
Deputy
that.
Hughes?
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality engage the services of Catalyst Consulting Engineer to design and propose new council chamber audio, video layout and request for proposal programs and oversee its implementation, and that the authorization be given for staff to oversee this process at a cost of up to $10,000, including expenses plus HST, to be funded on an unfunded liability from the 2021 operating budget.
Seconded by Councilor Romero. So oversee is implementation, which means that they would see it through to the end. Any other discussion points?
Yeah,
Counselor Gidney?
couple questions. So we're gonna pay them $10,000 for everything that they're gonna do, or just for
Not
part?
the equipment.
No. For this person to oversee. Is that correct?
So they will come in, they'll measure up the room, they'll decide what size the table needs to be, they'll decide all the accessibility features about the right heights and things, they'll decide about the electrical stuff as far as what the technical components are, where the electrical needs to be upgraded or changed. They'll look at where the speakers are, about what speakers need to be in here based on acoustics. They'll prepare essentially an RFP or a document, a technical document with all the specs in it for all the different, the number of microphones that I go screens, the standard of TV screen that has to be in here, the standard of desks. They'll prepare all that. It'll go to tender. The tenders will come back. They will sit with us as the technical experts and go through and review it and tell us if A versus B versus C are comparable or if they're different. And they'll give us an opinion and recommendation for council as far as which one provides the best value and meets the standards as far as quality, timeliness, installation, warranty, all those types of things. And then once the tender is given by council, they will then oversee the contractor, come in, install it, make sure it's installed properly, and make sure it functions properly and everything works perfectly before they sign off to pay the bills.
Okay. I've contacted 3 companies at Halifax. They'll come down, they'll do a site visit to see what we need, and there's no cost involved here. They'll do it, and then if we decide, then they'll go with the work. So, like, I still don't understand why we're paying them $10,000. I have a problem.
Which one of those 3 companies would you hire?
They come in and they tell us what they have, what they're gonna do, the price, and then go from there.
And so who's gonna determine what they're telling us, if it's truthful, if it's quality material, if we're comparing apples to apples, or are they selling us something that's the product they sell versus the product somebody else sells? Who's gonna do that comparison and tell us whether we're getting good value for money, or we're just buying it from that company because they're good salespeople?
Well, if there's gonna be any reputation at all. How do I know I'm gonna trust this guy that's gonna do this information for us? For example, same thing. I don't know who he is. I don't know his track record. I couldn't believe a company as well. I can believe an engineer comes in.
And so we're paying somebody to give us their independent opinion who has done this before versus going out and just giving a company a $100,000 contract, which isn't legal, by the way. It has to go to public tender for over $50,000 in goods, I believe.
Okay.
So, so what you're suggesting is we just ask the 3 companies and we pick one out of, we just decide which one we want and we write them a check for $100,000.
No, what I'm saying is the companies come down, they do everything, all the work here, they give us a quote, and we look at the 3 quotes and we determine which is the better one to take.
And what I'm suggesting is we don't have the in-house technical expertise to understand which one is the best quote. Because technology changes every week.
True.
And so we need somebody who can analyze, assess, do that technical document, do the RFP, and determine what the technical components are. So those companies you're talking about may come in with the audio-visual, but are they gonna hire the electrician to do the electrical part? Are they gonna hire all that stuff as well? Probably not. They're probably just gonna bid on what they sell as a company.
Right.
So we're trying to hire somebody who's going to give us the all-encompassing package and do it all for us. And when we pay the bill, we can guarantee that the system is going to work and it's built to the standard that's been quoted.
So, but his total bill is gonna be $10,000. We're not gonna pay him any more than that?
That's
Is that
correct. That's what's been authorized by council, yes.
Okay.
And this is the process that you agreed to. You all agreed to go to an RFP to hire an independent consultant to do exactly what this says, and you were all warned what the price would be. So this is what you voted on, to hire an independent consultant, and then that independent consultant will determine what it is that's needed, and then that goes out to tender, and then one of your 3 companies that you've been in contact with would very well apply to match that tender or to answer that tender, or any other companies in Nova Scotia could apply at that point in time for the tender to do this room. But this is what the motion first started as, was the hiring of an independent person who does not sell this stuff to do a review of what's needed, and then tenders would go out across the province, and then everyone that deals with this stuff would be able to tender for the project. That's the process we had agreed on. Any other questions? Councillor Brown?
I think this is the route we have to go, because it's great to have somebody tell us what we need instead of having a supplier tell us what we need, what they need for us to buy from them. I think it keeps costs under control, and we get a better project of what we want, and it's arm's reach. I'm in favor of it.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Romero?
I'm in favor of it as well. We need professional in this. We're spending a lot of money, and we need to know what we're doing.
And then again, when we get figure it out, it goes to budget, and who knows, it may be here next year. Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand. Contrary, motion carried. Where are we at? 11.1. So every year, Administrative Policy 9 comes back to council, and every year the exemption is always debated about what the exemption should be for low-income tax people. So Mallory, could you tell us what your plan is?
Yeah, so instead of bringing this forward every year and using, putting in the actual amount, we're just proposing to change the administrative policy so that every year we can use the March guaranteed income supplement amount, which is what we've been using anyway, but this way, we'll have to keep bringing it back. We will bring it back if we want the supplement amount to change, but for now, we're suggesting say the $250.
And then next year, if the March income supplement goes up, then
It will go up.
then the exemption goes up. So the exemption will be hitched to the income supplement amount. So it just will automatically increase as the supplement increases, without having to come back to council for decision. Do you understand? Is there any questions of Mallory? There is a motion we should probably put on the floor before we debate it, on that recommendation. Who would like to make that? Councillor Charlton?
I move that Council of Region Kings Municipality approve Administrative Policy 9 respecting tax exemption.
And seconded by Deputy Mayor Muse. Questions of Mallory? Are you all comfortable with the way this would work? Councillor
Just
Gibney?
a quick question, shouldn't that be in the recommendation that we have that in there so we don't have to do this every year? That it changes what should that be in the recommendation?
If you read Administrative Policy number 9, and you look down to the third, therefore be it resolved, you will see it is less than right there, the March Guaranteed Income Supplement from the most recent fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
So that would eliminate it having to come back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor? Contrary? Quick claim deed. So, Mike. So there's a recommendation. If someone would like to make that recommendation, and then we can discuss it. Councillor Romero, in whose district this is.
I move that the Region of Queens Municipality amend the previously approved motion of December 8, 2020, which states that the Region of Queens Municipality agrees to grant a quitclaim deed to Robert Dexter for any interest that the municipality may have in property identified as PID number 70243837, and that this transaction be subject to Robert Dexter becoming owner of adjacent parcel identified as PID number 700888919, or a portion thereof, and that all costs incurred in this transaction be borne by Robert Dexter by replacing the name Robert Dexter with Glenn Dexter and removing the second clause of the motion.
seconded by Deputy Mayor Muse. So Mike, do you wanna explain, you know it says in here, do you wanna explain the conversations you've had with Robert and Glenn?
Yeah, I guess just as a little bit of background, as you'll all recall back in December, council approved granting a quick claim to Robert Dexter for any interest that it may have in the parcel that abutted the estate of Phyllis Dexter, which was Robert Dexter's mother. However, I guess through grant of probate, the parcel of land is now in the name of Robert's brother Glenn. So I guess both Robert and Glenn have come back to the municipality, and instead of the Robert Dexter acquiring the land of his mother's, that the parcel of municipal lands that actually conveyed to Glenn Dexter as opposed to Robert Dexter. And to do that, we need to amend the motion that was approved by council back in December. It's the same intent, essentially, of what council approved back in December. It's just the name has changed.
Is that clear? Any questions of Mike? If not, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor? Contrary? And we had one absent. She left the... Selection of 2 representative volunteers for provincial volunteer awards ceremony. So Heather deals with this. This year there were only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 recipients. And these, Heather, do you want to just quickly explain where these come from and the process that council adopted during the last council that they used?
Yes. Each year, there's a provincial volunteer awards ceremony held in Halifax. This year's ceremony will be held virtually because of COVID. They've already planned it. It's in April. Sorry, I'll speak about it. Anyhow, each municipality across Nova Scotia gets to pick volunteers to be their volunteer of the year. The Provincial Volunteer Award is a once-in-a-lifetime award. You get it one time. It's Queens gets 2. We're one of the few communities that gets more than 1. We get 2 because we amalgamated, so we have to carry over one from the county and one from the town. So the way we do our selection is those volunteers that are nominated for ripple effect recognition throughout the year become our pool of volunteers that council selects from. So as the mayor mentioned, I believe there are 9 volunteer nominations received. There were several that were received as a couple or a group. If you're nominated that way, you count as one of our 2 selections. So anyhow, the previous council and several other councils prior had some concerns about how do you quantify and pick the best from a pool of such great volunteers. I mean, their biographies are in the package. They're phenomenal volunteers. We have wonderful volunteers throughout the county. So to try and weight them, for lack of a better term, is really tricky. So what we do is we draw them. It puts everyone on a level playing field, and it doesn't allow us picking who we know or trying to pick what's better, for lack of a better word. So if you're okay, I can bring this forward and the mayor can choose 2 ballots.
And I must say, I really like this, because having been on council past years, it was very difficult to do. Because you'd read and you think, oh, that's a great person, but then you know someone and you think, but they do a lot more than it says here. And it would often be a back and forth. So this is a very objective way to pick somebody. So, I have one in my hand. So the first one is Kendra Schott from Hunts Point. And you will know that Kendra did that whole Christmas Santa delivery gift. So what Kendra did is she delivered hundreds, she put word out throughout all of Queens County that anyone knows anyone living alone, that's sad, that's lonely, please give her your name. And she arranged for Christmas gifts. People in the county bought the gifts to be given to the person, and they were all delivered, and I thought, what a great thing to do. So let's see the next one. The next one is Ron Shoup, Liverpool. Now, I think Ron Shoup's from Milton. This is Liverpool, but he serves the Milton Community Association. He must be on the line. So he's coached Special Olympics in floor hockey. He's been on the board of directors for 15 plus years, serves in all kinds of roles, looks after the bingo. So he's another great volunteer representing community associations. So I think that worked really well.
So there is a motion.
So there is a motion there. Yep, so who wants to make the motion? And Heather will give you the names.
I recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality select Kendra Schott and Ron Shoup as the Region of Queens Municipalities 2021 Volunteers of the Year.
And that's seconded by Councillor Charles. The only comment I'd like to make is when I was on council, there were two categories. One was the youth category and one was an adult category, which would have worked this year because we did have 2 nominees who were youth. So we could have actually drawn one of those. And then but then some years we didn't have any youth. So, but it was always good to have a youth and an adult. And we have to vote on the motion. So we had a seconder, yes. So all those in favor? Carried. And the council implementation report. Are there any matters on this report that you have a question of? I'm not going to go through them all because you've all had this package and you all should have read it by now. So as you know, it's just a way of keeping staff on top of ongoing and what's been deferred and what's still in the works. So that's fine. I need a motion to move in camera. 3 items, moved by Councillor Amaro, seconded by Councillor Hawks, that we move in camera. All those in favor? I'll have a few minutes, take a break, water, something.
Break.
Then we're resuming on camera.
Thanks for coming, guys. No noise on the way home either.
Kendall, are you
What's that?
No noise on the way home.
There's gonna be a meeting, is there at some point?
Sometimes
Tonight,
How much training?
tonight, after this.
You gotta go down.
11-7, you're done. You can get 8 hours sleep in the day.
Take my chair with me.
Gonna fix it?
Next time, well, we're gonna get you one of those big hard, big brown ones.
You're bringing them here next time.
Big ones like this.
Oh, do they?